Hello, punk, metal, rock and roll fans. This is Brent Turner coming to you from North Beach, San Francisco, California at the punk mecca, the Mabuhay Gardens. We're here with the owner Francesca and a few others just celebrating the heritage of the punk world that came through the Mabuhay Gardens from the 70s through the 80s. I used to own the nightclub upstairs, which was more heavy metal rock and roll, called Rock on Broadway. If any of you were there, watch those stairs. And remember, at Rock on Broadway, we serve everybody. So Francesca wanted me to drop by and tell some stories about the day. I owned the club upstairs, Rock on Broadway, in 1984, 1985, and originally came across the place in an ad that was in the San Francisco Chronicle saying nightclub for sale. Well, I took a look and went forward. I was 22 years old, fresh out of law school, and thought it would be a good idea to own the biggest, craziest, maybe not the biggest, but certainly the craziest rock and roll club on the West Coast at the time. And I think that remains true to this day. People that were there remember it as being completely out of control with no rules, and that was the fun of it. A little bit dangerous, but a lot of fun. And so the people that were there, I had a full crew, staff. We opened up with 15 cocktail waitresses on the floor, and opening night was sold out with a line down the street. Black and Blue, Roadrunner, and the Ruffians played, and that was a great rock and roll experience. Downstairs, we had the Mabuhay Gardens, and this is the home of all the great punk acts. I started hanging out here at 13 years old in 1975, 76. So I was one of the early adopters, but I've seen everybody here from Black Flag, the Nuns, Dead Kennedys, on, and I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. My own band, Mad Rain, had the pleasure of playing here, and we have the notoriety, the great honor of having Ness Aquino, who was the impresario at the time, say that my band's fans were the worst that he had ever experienced in the history of the club, as that night we knocked the walls down, the bartenders and security quit, we raided the bar and had bottles out into the crowd, drugs were flowing, and fights ensued with people going to jail. The paddy wagons showed up and the helicopters, and we loved every minute of it. It was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world, and I hope that some of you were fortunate enough to come down to the Mabuhay during those years and experience what we experienced, which was a free culture, rebelling, and having a good time while doing it. Okay, a little about the history of North Beach. Like I said, when I got here in 1975, we were just coming out of the hippie world, and the Summer of Love in 68, I think, and preceded by that was the beatniks that were here, Kerouac, Ginsberg, and the rest, and eventually it turned into punk, a punk area, and at that time, before Ness Aquino, Dirk Dirksen was the impresario, was the MC, and he would do very funny things on stage, throw things at the band and announce them as derelict and horrible, the worst band you're ever going to see, and throw stuff at them, and that was part of his shtick. It was very funny. I got a kick out of it, but it was wild and very much anarchy ruling the scene. So those two should be researched if you're going to get into the history of North Beach. Certainly Dirk Dirksen was the pioneer, and then Ness Aquino came in after that. As far as my club upstairs goes, after I was closed down, Paul Bailoff from the band Exodus took over, and unfortunately it was his undoing. He didn't survive it and passed away soon thereafter, but the club remains a beautiful place. It is currently being run as a special event space by Francesca and Carl, and I would encourage anybody, if you can, to attend an event there. Thank you. As far as what happened with the club, with me as the owner upstairs, the Rock on Broadway, We operated for about a year, and felt like it was 10 years. It probably aged me 20 years, and everybody that was involved. We all tell the stories, and I still run into people at the Rainbow and the Whiskey in Hollywood that remember those times and still talk about their time spent visiting San Francisco and coming to the club, which is fun. We eventually were closed down by alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. They raided the club as we were turned into them by the sound person at the time who objected to being fired. So they went to the feds and said, hey, there's some crazy guys running a club on Broadway and they're not properly licensed, so you might want to check it out. The fact was we were operating off the liquor license of the owner, who we thought was the owner at that time, a guy by the name of Keith Rockwell, and eventually we called him on his failure to go through bulk sales transfer, and to his objection, he managed to make us whole and gave me a good parting gift, which I then went to Los Angeles with and lasted a few months. And that was another batch of fun. I stayed in Hollywood for 15 years approximately with the band Mad Rain, and our only notable real accomplishment was we had the most people die of any band around Hollywood. So my drummer committed suicide, my singer died leaving the Rainbow on a motorcycle, the manager died, and then we had our roadies die. So when I left Hollywood, I went down to San Diego, started up another band called OD, and that band suffered a murder while we were taking the stage. One of our roadies shot a woman in the head, and that was the end of my musical career. But I've had a great run and managed some great acts as well. I managed Jimmy Bain from the band Dio, helped some kids get on some national TV shows, and I wouldn't change a thing. But I wouldn't say that kids should attempt this or try it at home, because it's way too dangerous and most people die in the process. So back to the club in the ending, the ATF came in with their guns ablaze and closed us down for failure to operate within proper standard, and that was the end of the club. People were upset about it. It really felt like the end of North Beach at the time. The place kind of went dark, but luckily Francesca and Carl came along and put a lot of money into this environment here, this building, which includes the Mabuhay and the Rock on Broadway. And so they've kind of been keeping an eye on North Beach. But certainly those days, 1984, 1985, were about as wild as it gets. And I appreciate everybody knowing more about the history as it involves San Francisco, and we hope that those crazy days maybe come back again. Thank you for listening.